Hi guys, welcome back to ChessTrainer. Today we're starting a really exciting series, Openings in 10 Minutes. Is it possible to build an opening repertoire in 10 minutes? Probably not, but we're going to try anyway, and I'll try to give you some ideas. Today we're starting with the Scandinavian Defense, which is maybe, just maybe, the only opening where I can actually give you a bit of an overview in 10 minutes and help you understand how to play it, and even how to play for a win. This is because the Scandinavian Defense, let's get started right away, otherwise 10 minutes will never be enough, is this move here, d5, which, unlike all other openings, immediately puts pressure on white and above all limits white's maneuvering options. That's because there's a pawn under attack here, so white has to do something. If white plays some random move, obviously black is happy, takes the pawn, and wins a pawn. So here white has to decide whether to play the main move, which is to capture on d5, or to push e5. All other moves basically, the only one that still defends the pawn is this knight move, knight to c3, but after d4, it's already clear how black takes space in the center and already has an excellent opening position. So let's start focusing on the main line, on the capture on d5, where we take on d5 with the queen going against every chess principle. So, not developing your queen in the early moves. This is because, of course, the queen gets attacked. But we're hyper-modern players, so we don't care about that. We let our queen get attacked with the idea of placing her on a5. And in any case, the queen on a5 is quite active and tries to bother white. At this point, white will obviously try to further harass our queen and of course to take more space in the center. Okay, at this point there aren't any serious problems, but for the sake of consistency in our repertoire, here we play the move c6. Theoretically, we could also play the move knight to f6, but after bishop to b2. Now, I don't want to get into complications where after c6, maybe knight to a4 and an attack on the queen, so I'll try to give you the easiest line possible. So black plays c6, so that after bishop to b2, black can retreat the queen to c7. A small but important note for all you opening enthusiasts. The move queen to c7 should be played in response to bishop to d2, because if you play queen to c7 after any other move, it doesn't make any sense. I'm just making my queen passive, and my opponent is free to develop their bishop, possibly to a more active square. So let's say after bishop to d2, queen to c7, otherwise we continue with the other moves that we'll see now, without touching the queen. So to bishop to d2, queen to c7, otherwise no. Okay, so here we are with bishop to d2, queen to c7, but let me immediately reveal black's idea to you. What is black's plan? Generally, we want to castle on the opposite side from where white will castle. By doing this, let's say, we'll then make the classic pawn push on the opposite side, trying to checkmate the opponent's king. So this is quite an aggressive opening. So let's continue with normal development. White places a knight on f3, we put ours on f6, and white develops the bishop to c4. At this point, we'll develop our bishop on c8, because obviously we want to play e6 to develop this piece as well. However, before playing e6, we need to develop the bishop, because if we play e6 immediately, this bishop gets trapped inside the pawn chain, and of course, we don't want that to happen. One very important thing, please don't get this wrong. The bishop goes to f5, and that's the square. f5 is the square for the Scandinavian bishop. g4 is not the square for the Scandinavian bishop, and in particular, you risk running into nasty surprises like bishop takes f7, followed by knight to e5 with check. So let's try not to make these mistakes. This position is a bit strange. Maybe I could have played queen takes e5, but in general, g4 is not the square for the bishop, so don't even think about putting this bishop on g4. Never in your life, always on f5, thank you. Okay, white will castle, and at this point we'll play the move e6. Rook to e1, a normal move, knight to d7. Another normal move, queen to e2, white develops, and now we could already castle long, but let's stay flexible. Bishop to d6. With this move, we're basically putting pressure on the pawn, and of course, we're keeping both long and short castling options open. We'll probably castle long, but we still have the option to castle short. At this point, white should probably start considering moves like a3, which are fairly flexible moves that might prepare a possible advance with b4, and maybe also free up squares for the bishop. However, you can't imagine how many times I've seen in this position, in this structure, the move h3 being played, because the bishop on d6 and the queen on c7 form a battery aimed at h2, and so white, scared by this attack on h2, basically plays h3. Guys, this is a very serious mistake, and it already gives us a very, very good position. Long castle. Now white realizes the problem and finally starts to attack. h6, b4, g5. So we want to push the pawns, and of course later on we'll also decide which rook to put on g8, and we'll try to open up the position with g4. From this point of view, the pawn on h3 acts as a hook for us to open up the position because, for example, I don't know, rook to b1, and now after g4 we're attacking the knight and also attacking the pawn, so in any case we'll be able to open up the position thanks to the move pawn takes h3. At this point, white can't do anything but capture, and we can basically capture, and then we'll continue with the move rook to g8. And we'll also continue with the move bishop to h3, creating even more pressure on the castled position. Now white tries to bother us, tries to play this move b5, and here we need to know a defensive technique, because white also wants to open the file and attack us. Taking this pawn is a terrible idea, it's a blunder. Knight takes b5, double attack, attacking the bishop and the queen, but even worse, it opens the file. Even just waiting isn't a great idea because white could still capture on c6 and manage to open the file anyway. What we need to do is play the move c5. Thanks to this move, white doesn't open the file, and after that we'll be ready to play rook to g8 and continue the attack. Okay, let's say white plays a4 to try to create more pressure, and at this point rook to g8, I don't know, a5, bishop to h3. Look at how black's attack is much faster, and we're already ready to break into the position with rook takes g2. At this point, white doesn't have much to do. Maybe they can consider playing g3, and here there's a combination that allows black to win immediately. So I invite you to pause the video and try to find it on your own. Okay, I hope you managed to find it. The move is bishop takes g3. At this point, black has sacrificed their piece like a battering ram to completely open up the position. Obviously, white can't do anything but capture. Otherwise, if they move the bishop, there's mate to follow, so white captures. But even here, it's still mate, because after queen takes g3, king to h1, there's not much to be done. And now bishop to g2 ends the game. Because, of course, if queen takes g2, then queen takes g2 is mate. If king goes to g1, then bishop takes f3 is check. And now we have check. But we also obviously have the attack on the queen and the attack on g2. The only move here is basically to play rf1, and okay, we could obviously capture the queen and win anyway, but here, in fact, there's mate in 1 with queen to g1. So we've now seen a bit of the main themes of this Scandinavian. Generally, black tries to place the pieces in this way. The queen is on c7, but remember, the queen only goes to c7 if it's attacked by the bishop on d2, otherwise it stays on a5. The knight goes to f6, the bishop goes to f5. Make sure not to put it on g4 because there are tactics with knight to e5, so the bishop goes to f5. Then the knight will go to d7, the bishop to d6. Potentially, the king can choose whether to castle short or long, but since we are brave attacking players, we'll castle long, and then we'll start pushing the pawns h6, g4, rook to g8, g5, rook to g8, g5, and g4. We'll open up the game and try to checkmate our opponent. Here's the last thing I want to add about this Scandinavian, just to cover you against all possible moves from white on the move e5, which is another possible move and keeps the pawns on the board. What we need to do is transition into a French structure. However, we want to improve this structure. How do we improve it? By developing the bishop. Specifically, here we first start with c5, which is always a good move as it takes up space in the center, and then we develop the knight. Let's say white doesn't really have much to do. Maybe they can play bishop to b5, and at this point we can decide to play either bishop to f5, or in this case, even bishop to g4. This is a different position. Bishop to g4 here can be played without any problems. After that, we continue developing with e6, and we've achieved a greatly improved French structure because the bishop is no longer stuck on c8. Alright guys, we've reached the end of the video. I hope you'll be able to try out this opening with good success, even though you know well that I think you can't really do much in just 10 minutes. Still, I hope I've managed to give you some interesting ideas to try out in your blitz games. So, if you enjoyed the video and want to support me, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and a comment, and I'll see you in the next videos.